Let's respect Julie's time and
Yeah.
let's turn the program over to you, Julie, and let us know what's going on.
Okay, so, I am sometimes given little assignments by Dr. Kilbride, who I respect and like a lot. So I don't know if this is exactly what you want or what you need, but he just said to me, can you talk to them about trauma-informed schools? So that's what I'm going to do.
Cool.
Can you see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I feel free to say, Julie, I get this, or this is boring. I'm okay with that, because if I'm passionate about something, I always assume other people are too, but that's not always the case. And Tom has had to listen to me for years, and so is Jerry Nolan. So I'm okay with somebody stopping me. But just to give you a little background about when we talk about trauma, we're really talking about kids that have had a lot of that emotional, psychological, and physiological junk that's left over after some kind of terrible life situation. And what we know in schools is that 1 out of every 4 of our children have been exposed to some type of traumatic event that affects their learning and behavior. So if you think about that, 25% of the kids have something that is impacting their education and their behavior. So looking at that, when we talk about in schools, what are some of those examples of trauma? Right now we don't have war, but we do have a pandemic. And this pandemic has been very traumatic for a lot of our students. Some kids will do fine with it. Some kids are going to be really resilient and move forward with this. But there are other kids right now and adults who this has impacted tremendously and might not bounce back the way that we would expect. As a matter of fact, our hotline calls and our number of mental health concerns that we're seeing right now are almost overwhelming. So these are just some of the things, and domestic violence is a big one that we've been seeing over the years. So that acute trauma is a single event. When I'm talking about traumatic events with students, that means it's chronic. It's something that just really never goes away. It's happening over and over. And so that pain lasts a lot longer, particularly if you're in a household where you can't get away and you're a young child. So this was from a bombing years ago. And if you look at this child, tell me what you see by just looking at his face and everything that you see right there.
And I have muted most people, so if you want to say anything, you're going to have to unmute.
Help me out. What do you see? If you just saw this little guy come to you right now, what would it look like to you?
It looks like he's in a trance.
Okay, he looks like he's in a trance.
Looking for a lifeline.
Looking for a lifeline, okay. You can see something bad has happened, right?
Yeah.
So the problem that we have in schools is oftentimes you can't see that. They're not coming to school beat up and dirty like that. I mean, this is obviously a very traumatic event this young child has been through. But with our kids, they're not coming in like that. It's typically we identify the trauma because of some acting out behaviors that they might be displaying. So this is just, we get hotline calls and they come to my office and probably about four a week, I would say that we get at least. We average about 300 or something a year of hotline calls to Children's Division. So I want you to listen to this one example. This is a 3rd grade student. Last night, my mom and her boyfriend were drinking a lot. They were cursing at me and my brother for no reason and talking bad about us. My mom's boyfriend said he would kill us all except my mom. He said he could make all of us go away. We went to bed, but the boyfriend came into our room and dragged me off the bed and started slapping me in the face. He hit me all over, so I didn't sleep well last night. This is a 3rd grade child telling their school counselor this. So what do you think that's going to do in the classroom setting? What would you see? What would the teacher expect to see with this child?
no focus whatsoever, I'm sure.
No focus. What do you think that child's thinking about, Mitch?
When they go home, what they're going to have to deal with.
What am I going to deal with when I go home? Or they're going to be so darn tired that all they want to do in school is sleep. Or what we often see is kids might tend to act out later in the day because they want to do something to avoid going home. So I could give you hundreds of examples like this. This is just an example of a third grader. Happens in kindergarten, and unfortunately, no, I would say fortunately, because we've all been on Zoom, we've actually been able to see some things that are going on in households, which allows us to intervene. And so if you know it's going on a Zoom call, you can imagine what's going on behind closed doors. So I'm going to skip that one. But what we know is too that if it is any type of trauma is perpetrated by a caregiver, like a parent or a grandparent or someone, it's going to have much more severe of an effect on the child. You can often see it in drawings and some of the writings that the students have, what is going on in their head and why they're doing this. So we know that in order for our students to learn, if they don't have that rest, if they're not being fed, if they don't feel safe, they don't have good relationships, we're not going to get to that learning. And in the Ritenour School District, unfortunately, if you know, when we say 1 out of 4, we do see that. We see about 1 out of 4 students are suffering from traumatic events, and that learning becomes very, very hard for them. So that's why we try to put structures in place to support them. What I'm going to do now is I want to ask you some things, and I want you to use your fingers or use a piece of paper, and I'm going to give you 10 things. And I want you just, and don't tell anybody, I just want you to write down or put a number 1 or a 2 if this happened to you at all before the age of 18. Okay, we ready? Number 1, did you ever have a parent or adult often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you and your family? Number 2, did a parent or adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or hit you so hard that you had marks? Number 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch you or fondle you or touch your body in a sexual way? Number 4, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Or your family just never felt connected? Number 5, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had dirty clothes, had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high or to take you to the doctor if you needed to? Number 6, were your parents ever separated or divorced? Number 7, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Number 8, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs? Number 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member ever attempt suicide? And number 10, did a household member go to prison? So hopefully you were able to count those up. Did anyone have, and I'm not going to ask you how many you had, but did anyone have 0?
I'm blessed. I have to say I had 0.
Okay, you had 0. Okay. So those are called your ACEs. And ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there was a study that was done. And when you look at ACEs, which is what we look at, people that have at least 4 ACEs are more likely to have, it shows they've experienced a great deal of trauma, those people are likely to become an alcoholic, start to be absent from work, experience depression. So we know when students have a lot of what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that if we do not put in supports, they're likely to have some problems later in life. So the kids that don't, or if maybe you had 3 or 4 of these, because I definitely had a couple of these, but I also had some resiliency factors. I had some people in my life that actually supported me or did some other things. Maybe I had the church. Whatever you have that can balance that will help. But oftentimes the kids don't have the other balancing factor to go over the ACEs. So if we see kids that are getting expelled, suspended a lot, we also know these kids are at risk, but there are children also who don't speak up or don't say too much. And those kids, if those ACEs are not addressed, there's a likelihood by the time they're an adult, they're going to have a lot of emotional or possibly addiction problems. So again, we know that these students might even have lower or their language difficulties might be more severe. So they're going to have difficulty expressing themselves and also verbalizing things. Why do you think that's the case?
Emotions.
Emotions, Jack. If I'm constantly putting you down, or I am calling you names, or I'm telling you, Jack, please shut up. Okay. You know, I would never do that to Jack. I love Jack. But those students or those children are afraid to speak out or afraid to say something, and it actually impacts their brain development. So what I want you to think about is, so what do we do in school? We know that we don't say, oh, you've had trauma. That's okay. Then we'll let you get by with whatever you want. That's not the case. But what we do want to do is know that that trauma can explain some of the behavior, doesn't excuse it. So what we do is actually even change the language, because for so many years, probably when you were in school, when I was in school, people would say, what is up with that person? What's wrong with them? Or eventually we would see a lot of those students just drop out of school or kind of fade away. Or maybe those were the ones where we called them, when I was in high school, the, you know, the freaks or the druggies. But really what they were doing is self-medicating. So what we changed, instead of saying, you know, what's wrong with you, we changed it to what happened to you. So thinking of it that way will help us understand better. So we talk about in the classroom, what do we do to make an environment that is very student friendly, relaxing, you know, looking at, do we have too much stuff on the walls? Do we have, you know, or is it a very calm classroom for the students? Try to get away from those punishment type activities, because for students who have challenges, if they lose something right away, if I say 3 strikes and you're out for the day, once I get to 2, then I'm pretty much done. And so for those challenging students, challenging behaviors, we look at what can we do to make it positive. This is one of my favorite tools that we use with students. So if you think about that right now, where you are this morning, if you were to look at those glasses and you would say, where is my stress right now? Am I at a 1 or am I at a 5? So we know those kiddos that come into school and they're already at a 5 and they're at a 5 all day. If we just do one little thing to set them off, they're going to explode. So we need to think about, what do we do to reduce that stress for them and hopefully get them down to maybe a 3. And we'd love to get them down to a 1. But there are many of our students that just because of what's going on in their environment will not get down to that 1 for a long, long time. We try to put in some different stress reduction activities. These are just some calm down bottles that some of the students have. Some of the students have a calming kit. They have their own little kit in the classroom where if they're getting stressed out, they can go get some of their tools, and those tools are only for them, because we know a lot of our students could be in situations where they might be either homeless or in foster care, might not have their own items. So sharing those items then becomes another trigger for them. So we have their own items for them. We've built in mindfulness activities. So a lot of our students learn how to do breathing activities. Some of the classes do a little bit of yoga, stretching throughout the day to give a brain break. The classes have calm down or safe zones in all the elementary buildings. So there's a little corner in each building where the kids can go and sit and relax, and they know the rules when there is a problem. It's not to be a play area. It's really for those students. And you can see on the picture there are strategies that they can use to help them relax and calm down. We also teach the students at the elementary level about their brain, because they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So really learning about like the reptilian brain, your prefrontal cortex, and how that impacts your emotions. And you can see a picture here of this young man who is identifying the parts of the brain and learning how his emotions affect the brain. We also have what we call refocus rooms. And these are classes within the school building for identified students who we know have a lot of ACEs and a lot of trauma and are going to have some problems throughout the day, where they go and work with a particular teacher to really learn how to de-escalate. So here's an example of a classroom that is a refocus room. What do you notice here? What happened to this room?
Looks like it, I won't say got trashed, but it's definitely not as neat and organized as some others would be.
You got it. So this is what happens when you have a dysregulated student, but this allows them to come to this classroom, and they might have been out of control in the classroom, but we managed to get them to their safe space, and they obviously trash this place, but it's better to do that there than in a large classroom with your peers. And then it is a matter of, okay, we got you calmed down. Now you're going to clean this mess up. And we do that together. So it's really teaching those behaviors and saying it's okay to be emotional, but this is not appropriate. So what do we do differently? So trying to teach them the skills on what to do differently. So we know that relationships are key, and we're not trying to control students. We're trying to influence students. So if we can do anything, the number one thing we can do for students with high ACEs is to really have a good relationship with them and make sure they're feeling connected at the school setting. So that was a very quick overview. I could go for hours on what is trauma and trauma-informed schools. Do you have any questions for me?
Julie, I can, this is Dave Robinette. I've worked in a lot of SPED classrooms, and a lot of them have been the trauma rooms, not so much the physical, but the mental, emotional, and so on. And how you described it is spot on. These are classrooms that the kids, you know, their parents are in jail, mom's in jail, dad's disappeared, or vice versa. One kid told me that he was living with his aunt and they had no idea when the next meal was going to be. You know, there is a lot going on, and it's something that I, for what it's worth, I got a 3 on the list of 10 that you gave. My father was an alcoholic. I knew that was not the path I was going to go. However, our daughter has had issues, and alcohol was one of them. So it's one of those things that you see what's going on growing up. You try to understand it better. I am not as the rest of the club can definitely agree with. I'm not always the most calm individual, but working with these kids taught me how to be calm. You don't yell at them. You don't, just how you described it, it is spot on with what I've seen in other classrooms.
Thank you.
Society now thinks that it's just a discipline problem, the kids aren't being taught, which in great extent at home, they're not being taught. And a lot of us live by example, and we have a lot of good examples, but a lot of kids don't have good examples. And but sit down and shut up is not a good way to discipline a kid. So I'm sad we had to hear this, but I'm glad we heard it. So
Tom, it's very positive what we're doing in the schools. I just don't think people know how much things have changed over the years with all the preventative measures, the outside agencies that are supporting the schools, the Rotary, by giving coats. All of those things that people are doing are touching our students in a positive way. The media talks about all the negatives, the shootings and other things, but there's a root problem there, and it's our responsibility as adults to help figure out what can we do, to help our society.
Julie, I have a comment and then a question of you. Back in the 80s, I happened to read an article about teenage suicides. And in that article, it said it was now very high on the list, but 25 years prior, there were no juvenile suicides, which was kind of an interesting statistic over that period of time. Secondly, have you seen suicides within your student population? That's one question. And my other comment, is the suicide within the teenagers somewhat economics? Does it seem like the students that have a little bit more economic benefits will have more higher rate of suicide than the students of yours, which I would class into the middle to lower economic status?
So those are good questions. And I want to say, we have a very strong suicide prevention plan, and we put plans in place for students when they talk to us. And the kids are very open when we hear them say something or they talk to us. We have had, in 1 year alone, almost 200 prevention plans, and those go from age kindergarten through 12th grade. So when you have a kindergarten child who says, I don't want to be here anymore, or I'm going to kill myself, and say it repeatedly and often talk about a plan, that's very, very serious. So we do have that. Unfortunately, we have had some students die by suicide. And we work closely with Chad's Coalition and Annie's Hope, but our counselors and social workers are phenomenal when it comes to kids knowing that they can talk to someone. We actually have filters on our Google system where if students are looking up, like sometimes it might pop up, how do I die? How do I kill myself? Or something about taking a lot of pills or shooting, we'll get a red flag, and that'll be a high indicator to us that we need to check on that student. So that's something that we do in the evenings, weekends, throughout the school day. If they're using our computers, we can see that they might be looking up something that has to do with self-harm. And then your other question was,
My other question is, seemingly you'll hear about it in a suburban district like a Parkway, a Kirkwood, etc.
It doesn't matter.
I'm just saying, but is the frequency of it higher when the economic social situation is a little better or not? That's my question.
Don't have data to say that it's going to be different. It kind of goes back to those ACEs that we talked about, and whether or not you have some resiliency factors that are in play there, and that relationship piece is key.
Bob,
having somebody you can talk to.
I would even say that maybe the article that you read in the 80s, where they reference no or few juvenile suicides 20 or 30 years ago before, may be an indicator of how things were counted and assessed at that particular time. So I think things happen in communities and have happened in communities that we didn't always recognize as juvenile suicide, but often it could have been. Now, that doesn't mean that things haven't increased. They probably have, I suspect, for a variety of reasons. But I would be really surprised if someone could, well, I think it would be difficult for someone to convince me that 50 years ago there was no or very few juvenile suicides.
And
Okay.
people didn't talk about it as much.
Right.
Julie, this is Jerry. I've got a question for you. Does this funding for all these programs, does it come out of the regular budget, or are there federal grants or state grants or local grants that help pay for all of this extra training and the transferring of rooms and so that basically, how is this funded?
So with the refocus rooms and at the middle school, those rooms, those are used out of our title budget. But a lot of the extra supports come from the county children's fund. So, but our counselors and social workers, Jerry, are all funded through the Ritenour School District. But any outside agency is like Youth in Need. We have a Youth in Need counselor in every building. We work with Alive and Well. Those are all through St. Louis Children's Fund that everybody in the county pays taxes for.
Okay, I mean, I kind of knew the answer to that, but I just wasn't sure if everybody else in the club knows that there are funds out there and it doesn't all come from the regular operating budget.
You got it. Thank you, Jerry. And one of the problems that we see, it's not a problem. It's a great thing that we have a lot of Spanish speaking students in our district. The problem is we're not finding a lot of bilingual, multilingual counselors and social workers right now to support our students. And if you think about, and I know I talked to some of you before about our International Welcome Center, those students who are coming here that some of them might have come through some pretty tough situations. They're just coming into the United States. They don't speak English. There's a lot going on there. Those are students also that need a lot of counseling and support. And to find someone in the St. Louis area that is certified in that area and wants to work they're in high demand. So that's a big need for the Ritenour School District, and it has been for about the last 10 years.
So Julie, when everything seems, a lot of the trauma seems to come from obviously a broken family unit to speak of, and I know that the school district can't do much to fix the family unit, but is any of the stuff geared towards the students on trying to educate them so that when they become a family unit, it's not a cycle where it repeats itself? I don't know if I'm making that clear, but looking long term, that they know that these behaviors are not acceptable.
So that is something that, we have what we call our social emotional learning outcomes. And that was just brought up the other day, teaching our students before they leave, where do you find appropriate resources? Because there are a lot of resources out there. If I'm some marriages are meant to be broken. If I'm in a violent relationship, that's not healthy for anyone. So where do you go to get help versus how do you stay in that situation is something we would want to teach students. But yes,
yeah, I think I'm thinking more of the hitting and the verbal abuse and things like that, especially towards this, whether they're married or divorced or whatever. Just that you don't talk to people that way, even if that's what you've experienced. And
we start that as early as kindergarten. That is huge. Treating people with respect and how do you speak to people. So yes, absolutely. But we don't always get there, I can tell you. I wish I could say we had 100% success rate, but we tried.
Julie, I've got two things. And before I forget, I got an email from Ann Calameyer, who is on her way back from Florida today, cannot be with the meeting, but wanted me to say hi for her and tell her thank you for everything you've been doing, or tell you that from her, get my pronouns correct. Thank you for what you're doing and for being with us today and so on.
Oh, she's a sweetheart. Thank you.
And Jack, to your point about not necessarily counted, if you go back years ago, there were no teen pregnancies. No teens ever got pregnant to have a child out of wedlock. And I say that sarcastically. We all knew it happened. They just nobody talked about it. They were sent to live with great grandma or aunt, somebody up in Timbuktu or wherever it might have been, and you just didn't know. And I kind of like you were saying, Jack, I question whether things were counted as well. I personally, in the 12 years I've been with St. Charles, I've had 3 students that I've worked with prior to the age of 13 commit suicide. And so I know that it does exist. It's very, very unfortunate. And the family situation was, Julie, just as you described, and more. So I do get it. I do understand it. It ain't easy what some of these kids are growing up with. It really isn't. And for you all to step in, and every school district to a degree, some do it better, some do it not as great, but they're all doing what they can to try to help. I really do believe that every school is trying to mitigate what they can.
Well, this wonderful pandemic created a lot of pregnancies for us this year too. So while the kids were away learning virtually and home alone, we have quite a few teens right now. So that has created another problem. Not a problem. We'll work through it, but it's creating some additional stressors.
You made
Julie,
a comment about teenage pregnancies. We used to have the doctor, we used to have to go to this, I think a junior in high school, the doctors checked you over. The neighbor girl up the street she had a heart murmur. No, she had another heart.
Oh my God.
She was pregnant.
Julie, how much of the trauma can be traced back to social media?
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to get into that, Jerry. That
Oh,
is
okay.
just-
Never
we
mind.
need to, we need to add that as another one of the aces right now. It is created nothing but problems.
Yeah, I'm sure am glad there wasn't all this social media when I was in school.
Me too.
I had to deal with it enough when I was at school teaching and administrating.
So I'm going to go run and get the clinic started for our school district. I always want to say thank you. And I don't like to be a bore. So I hope you got something out of this, and, you go have a great day. And again, appreciate all you do. It's wonderful seeing some of my people that I've worked with over the years, people I just respect and love. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks,
you,
Julie.
Julie.
Don't fall asleep on me, Jack, right?
Don't worry, I'm with you, kid.
Take care.
Oh.
Next out of Maryville.
Very good program.
Just for all of you, I do have an update on a bit on Rotary on Ryla. I do have one student that is extremely interested. Ryla has been switched to Warrensburg this year, Central Missouri State University. And the last time I took a look, the registrations was still not open, but I'm trying to get our second student, and it's they're planning to go in person, so that's great.
Good.
Very.
Bob, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I will anyway. Should I, and I'm not being silly, should I try to come up with something for next week? Or have you got
I'll
something?
talk to you. I'll talk to you
Okay.
after the meeting.
That's
Okay.
fine. Thank you. Give me about 10 minutes and then you can call me.
Okay.
That way I can wrap this up and get stuff going.
Gary,
Yes, sir.
it looks like you're in your car. Are you zooming while you're zooming?
Yes, well, actually, I have brought my truck up to Florissant for service, and I was not Zooming. I was listening as I was driving to try to be socially safe. But yes, now I'm just sitting in the car waiting for the big door to open in front of me and drop off my truck.
But
Very good.
technically, you can't zoom in the car unless you're driving a Mazda. Remember the zoom, the
Yes,
Mazda
yeah.
tag? So I'm just throwing,
Yeah.
okay. I know, shut up, Dave.
I would never tell you to shut up, Dave.
Yeah, not once.
Ever.
That's in that list of 10, isn't it?
It is.
You probably can't imagine, but I was told that more than once. Just think now, in all fairness, you all may know, you may not know, and it doesn't matter. I went to St. Louis U High, got a very good education. I'm truly very proud of it. I had one teacher. This was the days of the chalkboard, as I explained to the students, because I have no clue what a chalkboard is. I had an excused absence the day that a paper was due. And it happened to him in the first class. Gee, imagine that. I show up early and my paper is sitting on the teacher's desk waiting for him to come in. We're in the classroom and it's there. One of the priests, and I will never, ever, ever forget this. One of the priests, and it was the teacher, came in and he said, "Oh, Robinette turned his paper in." Okay, yeah, I did. Good. I'm glad you gave me credit for it. And then he went out a few seconds. He said, "I don't feel like grading this tonight. I'm going to grade it now." Okay, that's his call. I figured he'd give us something to do. Wrong. He wrote my paper paragraph by paragraph on the chalkboard and then tore it apart in front of everybody.
Oh,
It took me, I'm a little slow on the uptake once in a while. It took me about 3 paragraphs in for him to figure out this is going to continue. I just very quietly got up. I walked out of the classroom. I was friends with the principal. I went down and just, "Hey, can I talk to the principal?" "Yeah." And he looked at me and said, "Come on in." It was, "Wait a minute. I didn't send for you. You're supposed to be in class. What's going on?" I told him. He shook his head like, "Really?" And he said, "Just go to the library. When the bell rings, get to your next class." I have told every class I've ever worked with, I have told them that story. And I said, I will not purposefully call you out for anything because I know what it feels like. If I do it inadvertently, if you feel I'm picking on you or something, please tell me. I have yet to have a kid tell me that. But I get the experience. I understand, and unfortunately, there are some not great teachers out there. So we here in the nickname Crazy Ray for a reason.
Yeah. Very good.
good program.
Yeah, good program.
Very good program.
Yep.
Thank you all for being here and participating. So Brian, back to your clinics. Do you need us to pick a date? Do you want?
Yeah, because yeah, just if the club, and don't feel obligated in any way, but I've had some people from the club say that they'd like to help. So if that's the case, if it's one or 3 or 4, whatever, if there's a few people that want to do it and just do it together. Yeah, pick a date. In April, we'll do it. Easter's April 4th, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we'll do it the 10th, 17th, and 24th. So if you want to pick one of those Saturdays, and then, just let me know, and then we'll schedule based according to what the club would like to do.
And Brian, my assumption is obviously both vaccines and then waiting the 2 weeks before we do that, correct?
Well, it depends upon your comfort level. As far as waiting for 2 weeks after your second vaccine before you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was told that the 2 weeks is where, for lack of better words, full effect.
2 weeks after your first vaccine.
After the first vaccine, okay.
Yeah,
well, no, you want both vaccines, correct?
Right. So you're usually about 92% protected after after 4 weeks of the first vaccine. The
Why?
second vaccine gets you a little bit more,
State inspection, oil
but
change,
it also
and I
gets you long-term protection.
Okay.
So so it depends upon your comfort level there.
Okay. Thank you.
If we're gonna pick a date, let's pick a date. How about the 10th?
That's the best one for me.
Okay.
And how many volunteers do you need?
Well, anywhere from 1 to 5. 5 would be the max.
I
think.
would like,
Yeah.
but that's the Saturday before April 15th, and I will be doing taxes.
You have no life from now till then, huh?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, let's think, Robinette, if you'll include that in the newsletter that we want, we're looking for 5 people to help out on April 10th.
And do you want me to, Brian, do you want them to just contact you direct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And then, I guess if anybody wants to be put on like a, what would you call it, a substitute list? If you're short people.
Sure.
Give
Sure.
us a call.
Enough with the height jokes. Okay, Mitch, really? I mean, come on, really? It was going to either be you or Brian. I knew that. So, okay, fine.
Sorry. Was not intentional.
I know. I'm just giving grief. Okay. I will make sure to put that in there.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.